Ellis B. Feaster's Radio Aircheck and Classic TV channel.
The trial of John Mitchell and Maurice Stans, accused of influence peddling on behalf of financier Robert Vesco, will continue tomorrow in New York. Over the objections of defense counsel, a federal judge today ruled the opening remarks by the government would not unduly influence the jury, and the trial could continue. Right now, here's the mild weather forecast for Boston and vicinity. Tonight, cloudy and mild, chance of a few showers, low temperatures in the 50s. On Tuesday, cloudy with scattered showers likely during the morning, however becoming partly sunny by late in the day and continued warm. We'll have high temperatures on Tuesday in the mid to upper 60s. Tuesday night, fair, low temperatures around 40. Then on Wednesday, mostly sunny and mild, not quite as warm as tomorrow's temperatures, highs on Wednesday in the 50s. The WBZ temperature now, it's down to 56. Repeating this hour's top story, Edward Heath today resigned his post of Prime Minister of Great Britain. Queen Elizabeth immediately appointed Labour Party leader Harold Wilson to fill the job. And that is the 10 o'clock WBZ report with portions recorded. I'm Ted Larson, WBZ News. Reminding you, if you've got your BZ ALA printout, don't waste valuable time. Call and form your carpool right away. Once again on BZ Radio, it's back to Jerry Williams.
254-5678.
Hello, America. Welcome back. This is Jerry Williams with me tonight. And since 8 o'clock, in case you missed the earlier 2 hours, is Dr. John McLaughlin. Dr. McLaughlin is a Jesuit priest, a deputy special assistant to the president. He's worked for the president for the past 3 years as an advisor, fact finder, and presidential spokesman. Previous to that, as a speechwriter. He also has appeared on many radio and television programs around the country. He sought the United States Senate seat for Rhode Island as the endorsed Republican candidate. And he's traveled widely for the administration and lectured throughout the world. And he's here tonight. And he talks about the president. And if you'd like to challenge him on something, 254-5678 is our number. Let's begin. Hello.
Hello. I'm calling from Cleveland, Ohio, and I'd like to address a comment to Dr. McLaughlin.
All right.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Dr. McLaughlin, you mentioned earlier that administrators cannot be held responsible for all actions that their subordinates may do. And I'd like to disagree in principle with that. Certainly, even the lowest denominator of administrators, and most certainly even a priest, must know that one of his prime responsibilities as a leader is to set the moral and ethical tone for his subordinates. And my comment is this: even if the president is not guilty of the charges brought against him, he must be guilty, given the scope of the Watergate trial, of setting an improper moral and ethical tone for his subordinates to function under. I believe the common term for this is leadership. And at that endeavor, I believe Mr. Nixon has failed miserably. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, Father, if you'd like to answer to that.
Yes, I take the position that the president takes with regard to responsibility. He has said flatly and outrightly that he does feel as though he is responsible for his subordinates. The precise point at issue is whether or not that responsibility that he feels should make him criminally liable for their irregularities and indeed for their crimes if it be proven that they have committed crimes. As I tried to stress earlier, although on the one hand one can admit to responsibility, nevertheless, by our American system of jurisprudence, one would not be criminally culpable for the crimes committed by those subordinates unless the superior were personally involved as an accomplice in the execution or the formation of, at some point, of those criminal acts. With regard to the moral tone that the president has set, here we are in a judgmental area, and I can only report to you what my personal sentiments are with regard to Richard Nixon. My feeling is that Richard Nixon is an extraordinarily moral person. I feel that he has developed values that he is a man who believes in God, that he believes in the operations of the Spirit. He is a man who was formed by a devout Quaker mother and a father who was a Methodist. He's told me himself he used to go to church services on Sundays, not to one service on Sundays, but to 3 services every Sunday. He is a person who is God-fearing. He is a prayerful person. And while it happens that we are faced with a series of embarrassments that have caused considerable adversity in the country, nevertheless, my feeling is that despite all this, the ethical tone and the moral tone that he has personally set for me has been elevating. And I would hope that as time goes on and the full story is told of Watergate and the rest of his presidency, and there is, of course, much more to his presidency than Watergate, that what I said earlier, that indeed he is a moral leader of considerable proportion, will become more evident.
All right, our next call, please. Hello.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, Dr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
I guess I have a question. I have to review a lot of my life in view of the possible impeachment of a president, and I'm trying to review my adult life and the previous presidents I've known, and things that never bothered me before, and trying to find out what high crimes are. And one of the things that I never questioned before that I'm questioning now, if we're talking about undermining the Constitution or executive privilege or in the name of national defense or security or whatever, that I have never found any excuse for is the rounding up of 100,000 Japanese Americans and putting them in concentration camps. I don't remember any congressional vote for this. I don't remember any. There are things that are so overwhelming as I look back on them that I didn't question at the time that makes Watergate to me seem a third-rate, grubby, crummy, somehow lesser kind of thing. And over the weekend I was reading in the Boston Globe something that is still locked up in the archives called Operation Keel Haul, which some Stanford University professor has been trying for 20 years to get released from the National Security Secret Archives and can't get them out, although he was backed by Ashbrook, a conservative, and by William Douglas of the U.S. Supreme Court, which certainly are the two ends of the spectrum, and still can't get it released, which sent 2 million Russians who tried to escape from Stalin and were dragged off and sent back to their deaths. And this has come into the fore again because of Solzhenitsyn, who has suddenly lauded this lonely professor from Stanford University who has spent 20 years trying to dig this out and is still locked up under national security. What bothers me is that we are demanding instant revelations now, and as we are approaching the possible impeachment of this particular president, I am trying to weigh the morality of huge, horrible crimes versus maybe grubby, slimy, little bitty ones on the grounds of impeachment and on the business of we have the right to know everything in this administration, but what went on in previous administrations are still locked up and we have no right to release them and find out what went on then. And this is what is troubling me very much. I'm an independent who voted for Nixon and feels very let down. But at the same time, I'm trying to be honest and fair and objective about it. And I don't want it to be a partisan kind of thing. I'm also a refugee from near Daly, Chicago. And I know that all of a sudden, once you got a Republican Attorney General in there, all the books are suddenly open and everybody's going down like 10 pins that was part of the Daily Machine. But as long as he controlled everything, you couldn't prove it. So you have to have an opposition party. And I'm beginning to be skeptical about, and I don't want to be cynical, I love this country, but I'm beginning to wonder if you just have to have an opposition party that will dig out the record. And if we just have, you know, if in Massachusetts we have all Democrats and we're not going to find out anything that's going on in this state, if we have a majority Democratic Congress, then we can bring down a Republican president. But we can't bring down a Democratic president.
Well, we have a Republican governor and a Republican senator here, so it isn't really a totally Democratic state, although there are a great many Democrats in the state.
We still have, every time we read
in this Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
we have a Democratic Attorney General who doesn't move when the Globe promotes anything.
Well, when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we have a sort of an independent theory. We elect whom we think should be in high public office, and the last few governors have been Republicans, and we've always had a Republican senator and a Democratic senator. So even though Boston has the image, or Massachusetts has the image of being a very...
Okay, let me ask you, Mr. Williams, with all that has been now revealed, and I know you like Mr. Reichel out in Chicago, with all that has been revealed in Chicago, would you say that any friends, past or present, of Mayor Daley should suggest that he resign or be impeached? Because he must have known what was going on. Nobody has suggested that Mayor Daley is responsible.
But it's somewhat like the lady was trying to get Dr. McLaughlin to answer. I'm going to try to answer if you let somebody in, all right?
Okay, be glad to.
I thought that Mayor Daley should have resigned 12 years ago.
I thought he should have resigned in 1960 when I lived there.
So that's beside the point. What we're dealing with, at least I feel very securely, in terms of the conversation tonight, to quit making it into a partisan issue, because it's a non-partisan issue. I think some of the polls...
I don't think it is, Mr.
Well, I
Williams.
think some of the polls indicate that. They're Republicans. You said you voted yourself and you're disappointed. And there are many Republicans who voted for Richard Nixon and are disappointed.
I was an independent who voted for Mr. Nixon and feel let down.
Well, then it is a partisan issue. Is that right? And then if somebody says, if they think it's a nonpartisan issue and they love their country as much as you do, and you say it's a partisan issue, then how do you resolve it?
I say it's partisan because I read in the Sunday paper that
we got that. Don't please. Excuse me. Don't go over that again.
Claimed up to $29 million.
I know, but we heard that. We heard that once before. You don't have to go over the same point.
Nobody passed the bill.
Dr. McLaughlin and I understand that quite clearly. I'm trying to say that it isn't all political. There are always political ramifications on both sides.
But we don't move until the opposition party has an opponent in the White House. Then we move.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. A comment on that?
Yes, I have several comments. I think that the central point the lady was making was that in previous administrations in this country, you doubtless had acts performed which, if they were revealed, would either have compared equally with what's happening now or indeed have been worse. And she cited one act which, to her way of thinking, is more serious than what's happening now, and that was the enforced containment of 100,000 Americans of Japanese extraction under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I would point out, too, that Senator Barry Goldwater has stated that Lyndon Johnson somehow was able to make $40 million while he was in the public service of this country.
Well, nobody indicates. There are many people who had no voice during those years who said that about Lyndon Johnson, who said that he brought about the war in Vietnam illegally as well, but their voices weren't heeded. They were always in the minority. Wow. They were always in the position of being adjudicated a nutcake if you wanted to take on the President of the United States. Nobody, as a matter of fact, I think I read it in today's Globe, one of our congressmen indicated that Congress is spineless. They have no guts. They don't want to make any decisions. They'd like the president not to be impeached. They'd like him to linger on in the White House because they don't want to make these kind of decisions. So that when you're making comparisons like the ladies from one administration to the other, naturally...
Well, I'm just trying to recapitulate what she's saying. I am reminded, too, of course, of the Bobby Baker investigation, which was shut off by the heavy Democrat vote within the Congress.
Well...
Then, with regard to Solzhenitsyn, you know that Alexander Solzhenitsyn has himself commented on what's transpiring in this country. He said that dense hypocrisy pervades the American political scene. Without in any way supporting Richard Nixon or the Republican Party, Mr. Solzhenitsyn says, how can one not be outraged by the clamorous, hypocritical rage displayed by the Democrats over Watergate? Now, that in itself reminds me of the book by Robert Conquest, which also describes what Solzhenitsyn described, the Stalin purge trials and the terror under Stalin. It's a book called The Great Terror. And I would suggest to you that by hindsight, as we look at what happened over the last summer, does it not seem that there is a comparison between the Stalin purge trials and the Irvin Committee hearings? And I speak to you quite soberly. Visualize, if you will, in retrospect, what happened at the Irvin hearings. You had a room about, well, the size of the Senate chamber, which is not too large. You had Klieg lights generating not only illumination but great heat. You had paparazzi photographers dancing around at close range the witness. You had, in most instances, a hostile live audience seated behind the witness. You had several television cameras with the realization on the part of the witnesses of 30 million viewers listening to their every word.
And that's likened to the purge trials of Stalin?
9 interrogators, 7 senators and 2 lawyers working in succession for 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, repetitive questioning, expecting possible conflict in testimony with a witness who realizes that with one misspeaking, he would find himself possibly 5 years in jail and a $10,000 fine.
That's the price of freedom.
Is that the price of freedom?
That's the price of freedom.
Or is that really a rape of democracy?
That's the price of freedom, having to go out in front of that.
In my view, I would think that we ought to give serious thought as to whether or not Archibald Cox was correct in saying that the television cameras ought not to have been excluded from that hearing room. Now, the final point that the lady made, with regard to partisanship
the only reason we've gotten to that point, let me just answer that one point about the television cameras.
Well, we can get back to it. I'd like to finish the point the lady raised, and that is whether or not this issue is politicized. Let me give you an illustration of the extent to which it is politicized. A man by the name of William A. D'Aubrevere has published a book called The Offenses of Richard M. Nixon, a guide for the people of the United States of America. This is the same William A. D'Aubrevere who works regularly for Ralph Nader, and he's also the man who managed to get a tape of the president's conversation between himself and Secretary Shultz. He had it reduced to a cassette, and he played it for the snickering amusement of the Georgetown Smart Set, in violation of all decent standards of legal ethics. And he has been reprimanded by this by the American bar. Indeed, it has been suggested that he be disbarred on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. The volume was underwritten by Stuart Mott. Stuart Mott gave $350,000 to the McGovern campaign. More significantly, within the volume, the author castigates Richard Nixon for not having paid an income tax. And yet his financing for this collection of so-called offenses, it really has a very low level of scholarship, is from Stuart Mott, who himself paid no income tax. So it would seem to me that on that point alone you have evidence the consummate hypocrisy of Mr. D'Aubrevere. In addition to that, it is published by the New York Times. So what you have here is that the impeachment lobbying is continuing to be the same old inbred, incestuous anti-Nixon, in some instances knee-jerk anti-Nixon haters who have come together with one common goal. It is massively financed and skillfully propagandized through what I would regard as essentially spurious arguments in an effort to destroy the one man that has been their nemesis for over a generation.
Whose nemesis? Those people you mentioned?
The nemesis of these individuals.
The last statement, if I might say this, Father McLaughlin, is so ludicrous as to be, nonsensical. I mean, it's so nonsensical. If I were to read, let me answer now, will you? If I were to
I have said nothing.
Yeah, well, I would try to
I'm
answer.
pouring myself a cup of coffee, Jerry.
You're about to, and I'm indicating it's nonsensical. I mean, you're charging everybody in the whole world who thinks that Mr. Nixon is guilty of some sort of high crimes and misdemeanors and have made a judgment based on what they've seen on television, read in the newspapers, what has come out of the White House. None of these people have committed any crimes. The crimes have been committed by members of the White House staff. If you read the indictment, it's so incredible what's gone on in the last year, and to indicate that everybody else is involved in this massive conspiracy to unseat Richard Nixon is really nonsensical.
Well,
These have come from people who also love their country, Father McLaughlin. It's not only you who love the country, or Richard Nixon who is moral. There are other people who are moral and love their country and think this administration is a mess and a wreck.
Well, I'm talking about the impeachment lobby.
I'm not talking about any. It's just exact. George Meany, absolutely supported the president in his re-election.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, come now. He didn't support George McGovern in his re-election.
He abstained from support,
Well,
Jerry.
but by abstaining, he in effect said, I cannot support what I would normally support, the Democratic candidate. So most of the George Meany people voted, most of the Labor people voted for Richard Nixon.
Well, I'd have to see the research on that.
Well, that's
I'm not sure that it
absolutely
breaks down
true.
quite
The
that way.
Catholic working people of the major cities of the United States were the people who put Richard Nixon over the top by such a large margin.
By that
in the last
abstention,
election.
Mr. Meany now finds himself in an awkward position because he's got to demonstrate to the Democratic Party that he's not anti-democratic. He also is faced with an internal political problem. He has to reassert the importance of the trade union movement within the Democrat Party, all of which seems to me is his justification for mounting this massive impeachment effort that is so well financed and so heavily manpowered.
Why don't they have the right to do that? I mean, if George Meany and the AFL-CIO...
They don't have the right to do that for this reason, that the grand jury, that the House Committee of the Judiciary, and indeed the House Representative, is analogous to a grand jury. And to lobby a grand jury is jury tampering.
What should the American people do then? Organizations who believe that Richard Nixon should be... What should they do? If you were in their position, should they just sit around and watch?
Let this matter run its due process
The president
course.
isn't letting it run its due course.
Well, I'd like to hear why or how he isn't letting it run its course.
Well, I think it's obvious, so I won't go into why he isn't letting it run its due course, because he isn't letting it run its due course. There's a new strategy every day.
That's called ipse dixitism.
No, it isn't.
Which means, since I said it's true, it's true.
Well, that's what you've been saying all night. That
Well,
anybody else is an enemy of the state.
You, Jerry,
You're indicating that anybody who takes another position is in effect an enemy of the state.
Your mind may be closed.
If anybody has a steel-trap mind, Father McLaughlin, and is closed, is yours tonight. So what I'm saying is that we have hard positions.
Well, why don't
on
we go
either
to the
side.
phones and see
No,
what
and
the
they
people have to
demonstrate.
say.
Even the position that I'm taking, the position you are taking, demonstrate really a great many people's views in the United States and opinions. So that I think that's what I said a bit
I can
earlier.
understand, and I do appreciate that many people believe that Richard Nixon has been involved in this affair. I can appreciate that. But what I'm talking now about is the massive impeachment lobby. I'm not talking about individuals who feel that Richard Nixon may be involved. I'm talking about the deliberate effort on the part of politically motivated groups to unseat Richard Nixon, not because he's guilty of any crime, but because they do not want him to be president for ideological reasons.
How do you know what motivates them?
I think it's obvious from the way they conduct themselves.
So it's an ideological and...
William Doverbeer, since the time Richard Nixon became prominent in politics, I dare say has been a convinced knee-jerk, in the sense of automatic, and I mean no disrespect by that phrase, but an automatic Nixon hater.
Well,
you just mentioned Richard Nixon's name, and he gets the image of a rag baby of the devil.
In every election, in the last 4 years, 6 years, we've gone through this business of this high emotion-charged arguments that are brought by either side.
Well, I don't think there's that much emotion here, Jerry. This is an enriching exchange
I'm talking
of
about
views.
Spiro Agnew and his approach to, as if he were acting by himself and without sanction from the White House in the off-year election, where the president was seen in California raising his V for Victory above, emotion-charged kind of What was the business against the senator from New York who lost, calling him a radiclib? You know, the bringing about of confrontation all the time.
You mean like Robert Bryan referring to Richard Nixon as
that
the absolute hypocrite?
Right, well, that too. I'm saying that.
Now, getting back to Spiro Agnew, in all due respect to Spiro Agnew, I can recall his Des Moines speech where he took issue with the tactics of the network media. And the polls after that speech indicated that a majority of Americans felt that he had a legitimate complaint. So he did some good things, too, did he not?
No, I can't think of any.
You can't think of any?
No, I can't think of one.
You think that he's just totally
No,
bad?
I think that he's, as you're talking about, politically motivated. If anybody was politically motivated, it was Spiro Agnew himself, whom nobody has any respect for.
So now you're playing God, and you're telling us what Spiro Agnew's motivation was.
What was his motivation?
Well, who is to say? Don't you think we ought to leave that up to God?
Well, you're not leaving much up to God. You said Mr. Nixon was close to him, and I read an article where you compared him favorably with Jesus.
No, I said that he was a prayerful man.
No, you compared him favorably with Jesus.
Well, I think you should quote me correctly. What I said was that Tip O'Neill's calling for the president to resign was like the Roman centurion saying to Christ, and I also put this in print, and I mean no disrespect by this. It is as though the Roman centurions were to say to Christ, you must spare us the ordeal of the crucifixion. Assassinate yourself.
Well, I'll leave it at that, and we'll return in a moment here on The Spirit of New England, WBZ Boston, Group W, Westinghouse Broadcasting. Today, there are thousands of people who think they're suffering from difficulties requiring psychiatric care, and their problem may not be emotional at all. It may be just an allergy problem, an allergy to common food additives or everyday pain relievers. That's the starting word from Prevention, America's largest health magazine. Although millions are getting much-needed help from psychiatric care, Prevention's March issue tells fascinating case histories of how doctors relieved anxiety, asthma, and other emotional problems simply by identifying unsuspected allergies in the patient. This is the kind of advanced news from the frontiers of science that 1 million Prevention subscribers get every month. Plus recipes, beauty hints, vital facts about nutrition. Try 12 issues of Prevention for only $3.85. We'll also send you free a remarkable 32-page report called Live It Up and Live Longer. If you don't like the first issue of Prevention, just cancel. Keep the first issue, keep the special report, you owe nothing. Send no money, however. Write Prevention, WBZ, Boston 02134. That's Prevention, WBZ, Boston 02134.
Announcing a three-for sale at your favorite Photomat store. Three-fer's great!
Three-fer! What's a three-fer?
A three-fer is a three for something. At Photomat, it's a great chance to get fresh Photomat color film at low prices.
A three-fer is a film sale!
Right, like 3 cartridges of 12 exposure 126 color print film for just $1.99. Or 3 rolls of 35mm 20 exposure color print film for just $2.99. 3 rolls of 35mm 20 exposure color slide film for just $3.99.
Say, you got a pocket Instamatic three-fer?
3 cartridges of Kodak 12 exposure 110 color print film for just $2.99.
That's a three-fer.
And we have more. Because at Photomat, your photo matters.
Drive in for the big 3-for sale at a Photomat store and do it now. The sale ends soon. Look for the little blue store with a big yellow roof where everything you need for good pictures is right outside your car window. At Photomat, your photo matters.
I was making a souffle for a gourmet named René when a car passed by so loud it made me jumpy. The muffler was so bad, and now I am so sad. My souffle, she fell like Humpty Dumpty.
Better get to Midas, better get to Midas. Take your car to Midas and get your muffler fixed.
I put loudspeakers on my car, telling people near and far why they should vote for me in this campaign. But my muffler was so loud that it scared away the crowd, and my hopes for re-election now have trickled down the drain.
Better get to Midas, better get to Midas. Take your car to Midas and get your muffler fixed by the guys who are specialists.
At Midas, we usually install a muffler in 30 minutes or less. We're specialists. We have to do a better job.
These are times like none we've known, and sometimes you feel alone.
Trying hard to stretch each dollar,
squeezing nickels till they holler. And you need a bank to give a helping hand. Understand what you want when you want it.
Why not see one of the 10 Shawmut Association banks, like First Bank and Trust, serving Hampton County?
For the kind of life you lead, you want a bank that fills each need with a lot of strength behind it. Well, there's one place you can find it. With a Shawmut Association Bank, you're set. You can get what you want when you want it. What you want when you want it. What you want.
Now let's return to Dr. McLaughlin, Deputy Special Assistant to the President of the United States. We're at 2545678. Hello?
Yes.
You're on the air, sir.
I'd like to cite one of the radical publications which has always been against Mr. Nixon, Time magazine, which about, I think, a year or two ago named him Man of the Year, and which, in its first editorial in 50 years, called for his resignation about 2 or 3 months ago. And this is in regards to the father's statement about Eagle Krogh and how Dean told him the president doesn't know what's going on. And I'd like to read a few paragraphs from Time magazine. Thus, Krogh told Wallace that Dean had confided to him on March 20th that, quote, the president is being badly served. He just doesn't know what's going on. To Krogh, this was inconsistent with Dean's claim that Nixon had been aware of the cover-up as early as September. Actually, Dean had only contended that Nixon had known about specific parts of the cover-up earlier than March 21st. This knowledge did not necessarily include the precise involvement of his various political and White House aides, nor the legal ramifications. Moreover, Krogh's description of Dean's comments to him on March 20th neatly coincides with a talk that Dean told the Senate committee he had held with another White House aide, Richard Moore, on that same day. Claimed Dean, I told him I really didn't think the president understood all the facts involved in the Watergate, and particularly the implication of those facts. Also, if I recall the testimony of John Dean, who, as the father said, all witnesses were grilled. He was grilled for 5 days, and the biggest contradiction they found, as far as I could see, was that he didn't remember the name of a motel, the Mayflower Motel or the coffee shop, etc. And Moore struck me as very unsure of himself, and he was a lot more subject to contradiction, and he was on, I believe, for a day or a day and a half. So, you see, there are two ways of looking at things, Father, and most of the American people don't look at it your way. And, again, not because they have anything against Mr. Nixon from the beginning, as Time magazine didn't, but because of the way he's acted. I'd like to know what your response to his general, to the fact that so many people disagree with him is in regards to his demeanor in handling the affair.
I would respond with a few comments, and then perhaps you can get back to me with what you think. In regard to the Time magazine editorial calling for the president's resignation, as you have rightly said, this was an unprecedented editorial, and it drew an unprecedented volume of mail, which Time magazine has seen unfit to discuss in its publication. It drew in excess of 2,600 letters. Of that number, 2,200, in excess of 2,200, which must push around 90%, were disapproving of the editorial's pro-resignation position. And of that number, of the number who disapproved, of the 90%, 1/4 canceled their subscription, which I think indicates something about the attitude of at least the readership of Time, which presumably is left of center towards the position taken by the magazine. You cannot really expect Time magazine now to report objectively on anything, since it has committed itself to a resignation position. If the president does not resign and he is not impeached, then all of those who have committed themselves to either an impeachment position or a resignation position are going to be, to a greater or lesser extent, politically embarrassed, and they're going to have their credibility to a greater or lesser extent impugned.
Well, the number of people you mentioned who wrote into Time is such a minuscule proportion of their subscription and their readership. And do you really believe that journalists, responsible people who work for a national publication are going to slant things just to make themselves look good? Time magazine doesn't need to do that, believe me. And
I have
You're
seen
the one who's,
I have seen so many errors in Time magazine, and I tell you this after considerable reflection, that I believe now about 1/5 of what I read in Time magazine. I would say I believe about 1/5 of what I commonly read in newsprint generally. You saw, I'm sure,
that's the attitude of the Nixon administration,
coverage,
paranoia.
No, that's the
paranoia towards the press.
That's the attitude
That's just what you said. You believe
Benjamin Franklin and others who originally gave that ratio of what you should believe of what you read in print. You saw, I am sure, the devastating criticism that Newsweek received for its coverage of the events in Chile. But perhaps that is besides the point. To address myself more immediately to the question of John Dean and his veracity, I am not here accusing John Dean of equivocation or prevarication or duplicity. I don't know that to be the case. I would, however, charge him with errors of perception, which can occur when one is suffering from fatigue. They can occur when one is suffering from a pervasive sense of suspicion. It can lead one by Irvin's, what has come to be known as Irvin's Law, to misperceive what is going on. With regard to Mr. Moore's testimony, he may have struck you as unsure, but he struck me as truthful. And I know Dick Moore very, very well, and my personal estimate of him corresponds to that of John Dean. He is a wise and prudent man. I think, however, that this whole question is going to someday, within the foreseeable future, be resolved when the contents of the September tape and the March tapes will be disclosed. And I have no doubt that the contents of those tapes will relieve you...
Have you heard those, Father McLaughlin?
...of your lingering suspicions that you have voiced concern about here this evening.
Have you heard those tapes?
I am familiar with segments of the tapes, and I have talked to 3 individuals who have heard the tapes, one of whom has exhaustively analyzed the tapes in relation to the Dean testimony.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. We'll return to Dr. McLaughlin in a moment. We're a little bit behind, so we'll take these messages and then continue.
1, 2, 3. You will see. The Nova 6 makes sense today.
The Chevy Nova 6. It's a 2-door coupe, a 3-door hatchback, a 4-door sedan, all with 6-cylinder engine economy.
Can you hear the numbers say? The Nova 6 makes sense today. Hey!
Chevrolet makes sense for America.
Day by day.
Godspell.
Day by day.
Godspell comes home. Godspell, the world's most popular musical, returns to the stage of the Wilbur Theater. Godspell opens March 11th for 4 weeks only. Seats are on sale now for Godspell. Don't miss it.
The serfs are crossing the moat. Duchess put up the bridge.
At least give me a hand, Duke. I'm having a personal energy crisis.
You know, since we let the serfs go, nothing but aggravation.
Speaking of serfs, why are they still hanging around the castle?
I guess they're hoping we'll drop some oil on them.
Oil? We haven't got enough oil for a good fondue.
Do you know what oil costs?
Once upon a time, a man's home was his castle, and vacations were something you took whenever you could afford one. But now, running the castle is pretty expensive, and vacations aren't any easier. Unless it's a Dunphy's mini vacation. An economical escape that gives 2 people 3 nights and 6 complete breakfasts for just $24.95 per person based on double occupancy. A tank of gas gets you to all of Dunphy's 13 New England hotels and back from most of them. For $24.95, you really can't afford to stay home. To arrange your mini vacation...
If it kind of gets to you that things don't seem to last as long or work as well as they used to, and you wonder what in the world is going on, well, here's good news for you from Budweiser. When it comes to brewing beer, somebody still cares about quality. And when it comes to enjoying beer, I'll bet you still care about quality too. Well, let's get together.
All right, returning to Dr. McLaughlin, your calls. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're on the air.
Yes, first of all, Jerry, I'd like to compliment Father McLaughlin on being a very articulate and certainly a well-versed spokesman for the president. He has been for some years now, and he certainly is to be complimented for that. The thing that I've noticed, however, is that he follows the tact of those who are in an indefensible position in that he allows you to speak for a certain length of time to ask a question, and then spends the next 10 minutes on a wide tangent of possible answers to that, never allowing you once again to pick up on a point that he may have made and to then challenge him on part of his answer. And I'd like at least for that courtesy to be extended, because I realize that part of his defense is being cloaked in the garb of the clergy, and it's rude to interrupt someone that we've all been taught from our very beginning to respect and not to interrupt. 2 points I'd like to make. First of all, he, an hour ago or so, in response to a lady's position about Mr. Nixon, said that Mr. Nixon was, in fact, a very moral person, that he was prayerful, that he followed religion, and as a matter of fact, he followed 2 or 3 while he was growing up, at least went to 2 or 3 churches each Sunday. And that example, of course, can be refuted, and I don't mean in any way to make an analogy between Mr. Nixon and those people I'm about to mention, but the same sort of analogy can be made to say that a moral person, based on the same criteria that the father gave, that Tojo of Japan was a moral person. He followed his religion scrupulously, was in fact known to dismiss high meetings so that he could go to his prayer meetings and follow his religion. There have been people who commented to me that in France, one of the most unbelievable things was that the people who made their living as ladies of the night, ladies of the street, prostitutes, if you will, who worked all Saturday night, the first thing they did Sunday morning was get up and go to church. Now, I don't think that criteria makes a person a moral person. I think what makes a person a moral person is what he does, not what he says that he does, or in fact the face he gives to his religious side of life. I think that the moral question can best be answered by the fact that for 7 months they have been trying to get the tapes that now the Nixon administration says will exonerate the president and will refute all that Mr. Dean said and all that Mr. McCord said and all that witness after witness said at the Irving hearings. Now they say those will refute them, but they did everything in their power to keep those from becoming public, including the Saturday Night Massacre where Archibald Cox was fired and we lost an attorney general and an assistant attorney general who then stepped forward and said they were in a moral position to say, wait a minute, you said that no holds barred. We went as far as we could go. You changed the rules, so I have to resign. Now, is that a moral position? Was he moral when he said on public television that he would cooperate with the public prosecutor, i.e. Mr. Cox at that point, and now Mr. Jaworski from Texas? I will cooperate to every extent I can, except when it impinges upon the office of president. Well, that is as broad a term as high crimes and misdemeanors. It can be interpreted any way you want to interpret it, depending on which side you're standing, of course. If you stand on one side, it's a straight and narrow line how you interpret it. If you stand on the other side, it's a shotgun approach. It's anything that may fall in that category. Right. So what happens is, we want to hear what's on the tapes. Certainly the tapes are fine. 18 minutes is missing, and there are these... I spent 12 years in the broadcast business, and I know that the possibility of the last excuse brought forward about a diode not working in a recorder, those odds are greater than my being able to touch the moon tomorrow night. I mean, they're just ridiculous. The fact that there was, in fact, some re-recording over re-recording taking place seems much more plausible, even if I wanted to be a defender of Mr. Nixon and say, wait a minute, maybe somebody was honking around with the tapes and didn't want everything to be known that was on those tapes because he was part of it. And in the ultimate outcome, it made Mr. Nixon look as though he had done something wrong. And to protect myself, I'm going to push the record button several times. Now, rather than find that perpetrator, rather than find the guy that recorded him, I'm sure Mr. Nixon didn't sit in the basement of the White House and push the record button. I'm sure there was somebody there, this unknown person that hasn't surfaced, that recorded those tapes, that heard them, that put them in the vaults. They passed through hands, they had to have passed through ears. What's happened to those tapes? What was said on those tapes that was then erased by the president's personal secretary? Well, somebody heard it. Somebody has to say, I know what filled that 18 minutes because I heard it. I listened to it before I gave it to Rosemary Woods. Where are those people? in the great Nixon administration, and I followed Nixon's career from the time he was first running for Congress when I grew up in California to his election to the Senate in a race that is totally unknown to the people of Massachusetts and to most of the country. The Senate race against Helen Gahagan Douglas. Talk about a moral person. That man who said in public television when he was president, when I am the candidate, I run the campaign. That man ran the campaign when he was running for Senate and allowed such untruths, half-truths, and innuendos to be presented to the electorate during his Senate race against Helen Gahagan Douglas. To now say that he is a moral person is just so repugnant to me that I cannot possibly believe it. He's the same man who said, you won't have Nixon to kick around again, and unfortunately, there he is to kick around again, because he's doing things that for the last 22 years have been his trademark.
Well, listen, we're running close to news now. I want to get Dr. McLaughlin to answer, all right?
Dandy, fine.
With regard to the 18.5 minutes, I'm reading to you from a summary of the findings of Dr. Alan Bell of the Dector Company as published in Science magazine. This magazine is the weekly organ of much of the American scientific community, and the editors of Science are not much more fond of President Nixon than the editors of most anti-Nixon newspapers you can think of. Yet here is Science galloping to the President's rescue. The company, that is the company that has taken issue with the findings of the quote-unquote expert, is chairmaned by Richard H. Bolt. And he makes, or his company makes debugging equipment and the like. Alan D. Bell is its head, and he's a special expert on tape recordings, whereas none of Judge Sirica's experts has ever had any known practical experience with tape recorders. Bell read the report of the expert panel, smelled a rat, and wrote another report for his own amusement, concluding that, quote, power supply problems, close quote, in the UR5000 were an equally feasible alternative to the purposeful erasure explanation of the Sirica experts. Bell's company does no government work, has no White House connections, and got no reward for the Bell report. One evening, however, another officer of the company got fed up with the circus on television. Hence he called Miss Rosemary Wood's lawyer, Charles Rhine. Thus the Bell's report's challenge to the Sirica experts later found its way into Science. Now what he found was that there was a defective diode bridge, and unfortunately that diode bridge was thrown away when the original experts reviewed the tape and repaired the machine.
Then how did he know?
Now you may find that Dr. Bell's report is implausible, but I find that it is quite plausible, and if indeed it is found to be true, it would support the basic explanation that has been given by Miss Woods. So let us not dismiss that report out of hand. With regard to Helen Gahagan Douglas, I would simply say that she had more problems with her own primary opponent than she had with Richard Nixon. As to his statement, you won't have Nixon to kick around anymore. Let me say that statement, if you review it in context, will not be seen to have been extreme at all. I witnessed a replay of this in a film by a documentary filmmaker entitled Milhouse, and I must say that I can see now why the Democrats didn't use that segment in the 1968 election, because it's very tepid tea indeed. Okay. And I think if it's seen in context, that it can be seen to be a fair, totally speaking now, a fair description of the press, because at the same time that he said you won't have Nixon to kick around anymore, he also said we certainly need a free press in this country, and I urge you gentlemen to be responsible and effective.
Sir, I'll let you this is Jerry. I'll let you pose the question, but I'm running out of time for the hour, and I'll let Father McLaughlin answer after the news. Now, what's the question?
I understand that. My question is, if these tapes were so valuable, knowing full well all the protection that is given to network programs, to programs of great historical value, why in the world wasn't a copy made of those tapes as a protection tape, as it's called in the business, and then the protection tape given to Rosemary Woods to transcribe so that there was, in fact, a master tape kept?
Okay.
Don't make me believe that they gave the only single recording of that to somebody to transcribe, because I don't believe it.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll return right after news and weather here on WBZ with Father McLaughlin. Stand by. TWA still has plenty of flights and plenty of seats to 35 cities in the United States and for short business flights. There's still no other airline with all the convenience of TWA's Ambassador Express. Baggage X-rays speed you through security. There are still carry-on luggage compartments on most flights. There are still convenient schedules to major destinations that let you go and come back the same day. It's a tough year for some airlines, but TWA is not cutting any of the convenience you expect from them. TWA is still TWA. Fly TWA's Ambassador Express to Chicago, St. Louis, and Pittsburgh.
See A Matter of Winning, an exciting new movie of the Grand Prix of snowmobiling. Wilder than anything on wheels, here is the dramatic story of a real snowmobile ace, Gordon Schaefer, battling his way to the racing championships. To him, winning is a way of life. Filmed exactly as it happened, the men tearing across the ice at 70 miles an hour. Movie entertainment for the entire family. A Matter of Winning, rated G.
Ah, it's a great night, Lenny. The open sky, the stars, this warm boxcar. What are we having for dinner?
You'll love it, Max. Real class. We got chicken soup El Bouillon, string beans Francoise, and hot dog stroganoff made with Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles.
But Lenny, they're the rich egg noodles. You shouldn't have spent all that money.
Max, Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles aren't expensive. They just call them rich because they're so rich and golden. You know, they make them just with egg yolks, no whites, and a special blend of enriched Durham flour. That's why Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles taste so rich. You know, Max, Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles will even make our economy meals taste like $1 million.
Lenny, this is the Ritz.
You have a house and car payment to make this month. You have groceries and clothes to buy, to say nothing of the unexpected expenses. If you add up the things you haven't counted on this month and find you might have trouble coming up with the money to take care of them, see HFC about the bill payer loan. The bill payer works like this. On approval, we lend you the money to pay your bills. You pay us back in convenient monthly installments. You can find out more about the bill payer loan at any one of the more than 1,700 HFC offices throughout the U.S. and Canada. Household Finance, an equal opportunity lender.
Never borrow money needlessly, but when you need to borrow, you get more than money at HFC.
At Household Finance, you may borrow up to $3,000 and choose from a wide variety of repayment plans. HFC has 23 offices in the Boston metropolitan area, also offices in principal cities throughout New England. Now, in just 90 seconds, we're going to continue with news, weather, and an editorial, and then we'll return with Father McLaughlin at 2545678. Able Rug is a giant rug sale going on now. Gorgeous Raya rugs from $24.88, striking Oriental designs from $88.88. Plus loads of shags, plushes, and broadlooms, all at half price now at Able Rug Cleaners, corner of Franklin and Cabrin Streets in Alston.
We wanted to make our prudent Swedish meatballs taste so good that even Swedish Americans would be impressed. We knew it would be tough.
I can't believe that you can put Swedish meatballs in a can that taste as good as homemade.
Well, no, I'm sure they're not as good.
Meatball out of a can? Swedish meatball? I can't believe it.
Well, we just heated up some of our prudent Swedish meatballs and put them to the test.
That smells good. I'm surprised. They are good.
They're the best can I've tasted.
Nice gravy, too. I'm not going to make any more meatballs at home.
Not only did our Swedish American friends go for our meatballs, they even gave us a few ideas.
It's terrific cold. You can use them as a hot hors d'oeuvre or a cold hors
You
d'oeuvre.
can put them on a piece of Swedish bread. It's the best sandwich you can
With
have.
a sweet and sour sauce and pineapple
Prudent
jam.
Swedish meatballs.
It certainly is a funny name for a Swedish meatball.
They may not sound Swedish, but they sure taste like it.
They were very, very good.
If mothers are worrying about colds this winter, imagine how they worried in Browning, Montana in 1916 when the temperature in one day dropped a full 100 degrees from 44 above to 56 below zero. Even then, mothers were saying to their families,
Nothing stops colds, but if you eat well, get lots of sleep, and gargle twice a day with Listerine, even if you do get a cold, maybe you won't feel as miserable.
and that's why Listerine Antiseptic has been a part of mothering for over 80 years. Follow label directions.
Hi, this is Larry Glick, and I'll be seeing you in 1 hour on Radio 103.
Where entertainment is concerned, WBZ Boston, Group W, Westinghouse Broadcasting.
It's 56 degrees in Boston. Tonight's low will be near 50. I'm Ted Larson reporting the 11 o'clock WBZ News. Informed sources at the State Department tonight say the Arab oil embargo against the United